Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean Season 1 on Netflix. And I enjoyed this somewhat, mainly just because there's only 12 episodes at this moment. Now, granted, they do stop it at a nice kind of endpoint, but I was just kind of more waiting around to see, hey, is there going to be any more else dropped soon? Because sometimes Netflix does that where it's like, hey, here's like the first half, and then you gotta wait a little bit or even longer to get the second half, and you're like, okay, I'm assuming this is just gonna be like they're gonna do it in certain chunks. And I overall still enjoyed it. I liked learning about Jolene Cujo, the daughter of Jotaro Cujo, and all of the strange shenanigans that she gets into. Now, I I don't know how the pacing is in the manga, but it seemed that it was kind of accelerated here because certain. Now, granted, that sometimes happens within JoJo's with certain seasons or whatnot. Certain things are just amped up to such an insane degree that you're like, what? And the thing is, you see that kind of happen more in these 12 episodes because you really, at first, I was like, I do not like Jolene, but it kind of echoed how I was kind of not that into Jotaro in the beginning before they kind of did more with him, and also then like transitioned him into like part 4 and part 5 and now here. So they were able to, by the end of these 12 episodes, at least have me being like, all right, Jolene is a character that I'd be into, because we start off and we see that she's dealing with going to prison in 2011 in Florida, and I don't like her at first because not because she's lovey-dovey with this Romeo dude, but he like hits someone and then she just decides to kind of help his ass out because he. Granted, I understand that kind of situation's nutty, but I'm like, I'm not gonna help a dude cover up this kind of shit. And then we see that it was pretty much an elaborate kind of plot that links back to kind of Dio kind of shit, which I don't mind them linking back to Dio, but I do notice that they kind of get stuck with that, but mainly because Dio was such a good villain that I can understand them like going back and kind of like pulling from that. And part 5 had that good kind of thing of it's like the protagonist is Dio's son and doing all the kind of things that would kind of work around with that. So that was definitely an interesting kind of spin on this. But we see that she meets with her attorney who looks like an elf. It's really kind of weird. I'm like, you gonna comment on this? But he gives her some stuff. One with a pendant with like stone part of the arrow that Jotaro sent her. She gets pricked by it, and of course her stand, Stone Ocean, comes out, and she's kind of learning about it. But she follows the attorney's advice to a plea bargain deal. But the thing is, she is not given all the accurate information that a lawyer should do because this lawyer is not working for her. The lawyer is working for Romeo and his family, and actually this other kind of dude at the end. So she is now sentenced to 15 years in prison in Green Dolphin Street prison, this kind of hardcore one, where that's where we're pretty much centered around. She, of course, along the way gets introduced to this other inmate, Aramis, who's like, yeah, you gotta have money and stuff like this, and she's... we get introduced to kind of the prison system. She's hiding money in her boobs so that way they can get past all the kind of body checks and everything, and that prison is expensive and crazy, and like Jolene not having any of that shit. And then we start seeing everything just going completely and utterly crazy in this prison. Now, I don't mind it, but the thing is, 12 episodes isn't bad, but you gotta learn how to modulate. Because she gets in, and her cellmate is just fucking nuts. Like, alright at one moment, and fucking nuts the next. And we find out that she's got a stand that she can like shrink people with, and Jolene figuring out how to like utilize her own stand with what's going on, and figuring out how to beat this chick and kind of like get through all the stuff that she's got to is interesting and compelling. And the thing is, it's kind of creepy because you're like, okay, she's got this like bird kind of thing, and you find out she's dressing up people she like shrinks them and dresses them as pets and like has this really abusive relationship with them. But she then, of course, is able to outsmart them like the Joestar style and gets through it that way. Doing her aura and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting and nice. And we learned that she doesn't really have the best relationship with Jotaro, which I needed a little bit more background story on that. I don't know if it's a little bit different in the manga or whatnot, but we find out that they just don't have that good of a relationship. She was more of the kind of delinquent doing weird ass shit when she was 14, and that Jotaro was probably dealing with some kind of stand related thing around that point that precluded him from being there or whatnot. And we see that kind of shift later on as things kind of escalate. So she's able to take that person down and kind of has her as a lackey for a little bit. And she then, let's see here, that her father pretty much comes to visit her to see what's going on. And she's like, why the hell is this going on? And we get that whole situation where they're pretty much trapped by this certain, well, actually two stands, which we don't learn about until everything's kind of going down. But this Emporio kind of dude, little kid who was born in the prison, which nobody fucking's able to do anything about because he's got a stand that he can like hide and shit. He's like telling her, don't go there because you're going to get like assassinated and shit. And she's dealing with that. Aramis is dealing with her kind of stuff as well. Well, that's after that. But she, of course, starts laying down on her father, and her father's like, I'm here to get you out because somebody's targeting you for some reason. Because, Jolene was able to kind of get vengeance on the attorney dude utilizing her stand, which I'm like, she was exhibiting, like, beginning kind of Jotaro kind of stuff. I'm like, she made him, like, crash utilizing her stand, which I'm like, god damn. And the thing is, her anger at the lawyer is legitimate, but if you start going through and doing the means that like those people do for it, like killing and doing all that kind of stuff, you have no moral high ground on that. You're like, you got to beat them in the right way, and we do kind of see her kind of transitioning into that kind of stuff while still beating the shit out of motherfuckers. Let us see. So they have to deal with this weird kind of thing of fighting in dreams for a little bit before they're able to kind of get out. And then we see that there's this main one, Whitesnake, which definitely, it's interesting because Whitesnake kind of reminds me of Kira's stand, Killer Queen, and it's interesting to have that kind of fusion of Kira from Part 4 and like Dio's kind of whole stuff going on. I'm like, this should be an interesting kind of villainous kind of thing to work with. And that works out because this person, this stand can utilize their power to eject two discs, memory and stand disc, and that this whole thing was a plot by Father Pucci to get vengeance on Jotaro for taking out Dio, because we go back and we learned that Dio was trying to figure out how to get into heaven without dying, and that he had written it down in a book and Jotaro had burned it. Now granted, we learned that pretty much towards the end, which kind of sucks because it definitely feels kind of exposition dumpy, and that we need a little bit more time to process and kind of get through before we kind of take a falling action. We do have a nice closure point, but it's like, what the fuck? And we see that Jolene was trying to get out because he had utilized the Speedwagon Foundation to have a submarine there to get her out. But the thing is, Jotaro doesn't have his memories or his stand ability because of what Whitesnake did. And he, of course, also takes out the stand user that he had teamed up with. So that way, he's pretty much safe. But Jolene pretty much gets imprisoned in solitary for an escape attempt, and the Speedwagon Foundation was able to like get Jotaro's body, but if she doesn't get those discs back, he's gonna die. Then we take a little shuffle, and we see that Aramis, she was the one that found the pendant and sold it off for $200, and she had pretty much got a pinprick by the stone arrow as well. And that is now floating around. Like, Jolene got the pendant back, but he's like, yeah, I hoped you'd get your stand and, like, be able to do some kind of stuff. But she gets a stand called Stickers where she can pretty much duplicate certain things. And then she's got to deal with this whole kind of scenario that I felt very kind of, like, uncomfortable with. This one dude, Thunder McQueen, he was given a stand by, uh, White Snake and no, Pale Snake. It flashes back and forth, not in the anime, but I think it's called certain different kind of things in like the manga versus what they translated in the anime. Pale Snake, and any kind of damage that's done to him will be echoed on someone else, and he's just always trying to kill himself. And it's really weird how Aramis is trying to kind of like deal with him. First, trying to be like, "Hey, I'll show you my panties," and then being like yelling at him and all this kind of stuff as he's trying to kill himself. It was just very kind of uncomfortable for me, and I understand that there's like all different kinds of ways to kind of express and like examine a topic, but having this suicidal guy trying to end himself and having that as the battle, and like Aramis trying to make sure that he doesn't kill himself because she's gonna be killed, and her not trying to like kind of like empathize with him on any kind of level, really just it just really put me off. I'm like, this is really kind of fucked up, and it's just mainly done for kind of laughs and weird kind of drama, and I'm like, I'm not okay with this. Like, if you explore the topic and explore it in a nuanced kind of way, sure. And having this kind of thing happening where she's actually trying to, like, get him to stop and be like, hey, let's try and figure this out together. Rather than the weird kind of heightened, overdramatic kind of way that they kind of did it. That needed to be handled better to me. But she's able to stop him, gets the disc, meets with Emporio, and kind of figures out that there's some weird shit going on, that people are getting stands that are other people's stands, and they have to kind of figure out what's kind of going on. We then shift to kind of like past the kind of halfway point, and we see that these two guys get pretty much killed by this weird kind of thing, and it's like, what the fuck? And they're prisoners at the place, so they need to kind of like go and see what's going on. So Jolene, Aramis, and like the rest, these three other women pop it. They go follow this guard who's like an asshole and tries to do power play shit. There's a lot of that going on with the guards of the prison, and just immediately going completely shouting match, which again, that happens, but it's just like to like such extremes as like, oh, whiplash. But they're able to kind of handle him, but he kind of pretty much gets killed, and we see that they're trying to look for Jotaro's his discs, and they were able to pretty much figure out kind of what was going on. Let me see. Because Jolene was able to kind of get the information, and because of the memory disc that Aramis was able to get from McQueen, she was able to kind of like pass that around. And the thing is, Jolene was trying to keep one of no, both of those were gone at that point. It's a little bit later that she's keeping one of the discs safe. But they were able to see this kind of tractor, and they're able to go in there, find it, and like, oh, okay, but they have to fight this stand user, which is all these kind of like plankton and everything. So it was interesting to see another kind of thing. This one called FF for like Foo Fighters, and they had a really interesting one where is kind of just they have to be near water and utilize their stand in some weird kind of interesting kind of ways. But he's supposed to protect that, and Father Pucci's like, I don't give a shit about this motherfucker. But he's trying to like prove himself, herself. It's not really explored which one, but he does take the form of a woman that he kills, him or her. It's weird. It's a whole collection of like plankton kind of shit. So once she's like pretty much beaten, and Jolene's like, you know what? You're just trying to figure out what you are. I'm not going to kind of kill you. So going to that kind of transition of like, she has the Jotaro kind of anger and shit in the beginning, but then towards the end she's able to kind of like temper it and be like, yeah, I'm not going to completely thunder shit on something, but she's like, yeah, I'll help you out. So she gets the Star Platinum stand disc, but they still need to know where the memory discs are as well. So they get all those discs. They're able to kind of figure out what's going on. Father Bucci's trying to like figure out what to do. I was like, all right, cool. Then of course we kind of get his backstory of what's going on as we're getting towards the end. He's utilizing some other people. They utilize this debt stand, which was kind of interesting, about like a ball passing back and forth. and Jolene's able to. She's like, hey, yeah, I never specified who I'd be playing catch with, so yeah, screw you, and is able to like take her ass out while still making sure that Aramis and herself are still alive. That one was kind of an interesting one, fight wise, because Foo Fighter wasn't really utilized that much except for like playing the catch and like, yeah, I'm trying to be a human, and I don't mind that. It's just I need a little bit more time with it, so I don't like have a definitive kind of one way or another with how Foo Fighter is, because she came in towards kind of like the midway back half point and then doesn't really factor into like certain kind of things until later. Let's see. That one, so Father Pucci's like, alright, fuck, shit. Then we get towards the end and we see that Jolene is attempting to contact the Speedwagon Foundation, and they're like, alright, we'll kind of send this person to help pick it up in the courtyard, get there, and we'll be good. She is able to be taken by Emporio to be like, hey, listen, we know you got a time constraint. Let me send this dude a weather forecast to help you. He's a stand user, and he really talks softly. Well, they're trying to go, but they get into a fight with this like anti-gravity dude, which that was a pretty interesting one because weather forecast is able to manipulate the weather, and this one was able to actually really showcase his stand style and everything. This was actually a pretty good fight. I like this one. Granted, it had the seesawing back and forth, but it had a very interesting kind of use of that dude's power, even though he was in the like upper position of like upper hand of that fight a lot longer. But we see him utilizing his stand to be able to kind of fly, create pretty much an atmospheric kind of cloud suit for him and Jolene to breathe, because his anti-gravity thing's also able to do a vacuum kind of effect where you aren't able to kind of breathe, and it's like, holy shit. But they're able to pretty much get him into a position where they're able to knock him out, but of course Father Pucci pops up, but Jolene doesn't know that he is Pale Snake's stand user, and he's trying to make sure that he's got the upper hand on Jotaro, and is going to use Jotaro's memory disk to try and figure out what was in Dio's notebook that he burned. Well, Jolene's able to get to the courtyard, but is shot and is in trouble, but Weather Forecast is able to utilize his skills to make it rain poison frogs. And Jolene's able to kind of make sure that she's alive throughout this, even though she's bleeding. And we see a guard pretty much like dying, and Father Pucci's in a compromised position, but he's able to utilize his smarts to get out of that, even though he fucks over a guard by essentially shooting, utilizing the frogs to like blind the motherfucker and get out of his position, so that way he can kind of get around and try and take out Jolene. However, she's able to get the disc to the Speedwagon Foundation's contact, which is a carrier pigeon. I'm like, alright. Thing is, it's been a little bit, so I'm like, alright, I don't remember this, but go for it. And that gets out. Jolene pretty much gets to the hospital and pretty much locked up. But the thing is, she is unable to ascertain who the user is of Pale Snake, and he then utilizes another stand user to try and do something with a bone from Dio. And bones play an important part for some reason, because Emporio gave the bone to Jolene when she was pretty much going to try and be assassinated when she was visiting Jotaro in the like visitor area. And Emporio is like, yeah, I was born here, my mother died here, and like shit's crazy here. And that's just a lot to kind of pack into 12 episodes, and I don't mind it. I think they did a good job with the dubbing. Action scenes were pretty interesting enough, like your usual kind of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure kind of stuff. Nothing that was like out of the ordinary or like really kind of bad, you know what I mean? It's just, okay, this is JoJo's, this is what you get. And that's fine. I'm like, there's no bad things about it, no good things about it that like are out of the ordinary. It's like, if you're into JoJo's, these action scenes will be good for you. Character development wise, because of how short this is at the moment, you don't get as much time for character development as I would like. Like, Jolene's cellmate. She goes nutty and then is like pretty much into the prison bitch position like that, and then she's kind of like out of there. Aramis gets a little bit better as we've learned that she's dealt with the prison system before and is just trying to survive and get through all this crazy insanity as it keeps piling on. However, we need a little bit more time to kind of explore that. Foo Fighters I've already brought up is like, hey, this will be an interesting character if we get him. Like, get a good amount more time of him. And Father Pucci, we don't get his development until later on. So if you're into character development and story and all that kind of stuff, this is a good starting, but it's just the starting. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how much more they've got to adapt and how many more episodes they're going to do it with. Because I've just noticed with a lot of cartoons, not just cartoons, but TV shows, cartoons, anime, TV shows, freaking episode lists have just varied so wildly. It's like, the thing is, the cool thing is to make them short, and it's like, no, you need to make sure that you do with enough time to let the story breathe. Like Golden Wind. They at least let it breathe a little bit with what was going on. Now, granted, could some of them have been cut or shortened and condensed? Possibly, but you got a good, decent amount out of there. I hope we get a good, decent amount out of here to give Jolene a good run, so that way we can see a good amount of her character development. Because at first I was like, I don't know how much I'm going to like Jolene, but by the end I'm like, okay, there's a good amount of nuance here with her, and I do like how she went from like, I'm gonna fucking burn some shit down to, okay, I'm gonna burn some shit down because I want to protect my dad because I learned some shit. And seeing her kind of like shift into that kind of mentality because she's learned things and she's trying to help some people and kind of grow that way. I'm like, okay, cool. Or that, want to definitely see that. And hopefully we see Father Pucci's kind of descent from power, because it is always interesting to have a kind of villain put up like this. Well, like we saw with Dio, Kira, Emperor Crimson, Diavolo in Golden Wind. He definitely has when you see those villains start getting into situations where they start to doubt their strength if it would be enough, that's always interesting because you never know exactly where they're going to go and how they're going to kind of react. And Father Pucci definitely has, at least from what I've seen, the kind of character that would be interesting to see in those kind of scenarios. Let me see. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to anybody who's a fan of JoJo's. It usual kind of stuff, maybe a little bit more amped up pacing-wise because it's only 12 episodes at this point, and hopefully they'll kind of add more because I haven't heard any more information on that until this point. Now, granted, if you've got more information, I'm always happy to hear about it. But yeah, character development, definitely a good base. And it's only 12 episodes at this point, so it would definitely be a kind of nice little kind of quick thing for someone to like kind of get through. Definitely be careful age range wise. Because it goes fucking hard on the prison shit. Not fucking hard completely, not like complete insanity, but you're gonna have to fucking explain some things on certain things. And certain things, it just could be triggering for people, like the whole suicide kind of thing, and people getting organs and shit ripped out from them from a debt collecting stand. Yeah. But overall, I enjoyed it and can't wait to see kind of what else more we get out of it. So those are my opinions on the anime. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.